It's Daniel with Driving Dragons. Today, I'm going to take a brief minute to talk about something a little bit different. This has got nothing to do with anything in-game. This is going to be about being a consumer of role-playing game media. So, stay tuned. I'll see you on the other side. So, a big part of being in the tabletop role-playing game hobby is spending money. To be quite frank, we have to buy books, we have to buy dice, we have to buy miniatures in some cases, maps, modules, all the different fun stuff that goes into playing the games that we enjoy. And one of the big things that's happened here, and this is going to be this is going to apply a lot more to Dungeons and Dragons than it does to certain other games. But you can actually see the same ramifications in other mediums. People will complain about certain things, such as the fact that Wizards of the Coast has managed to introduce power creep into tabletop role-playing games, a place where it should never be. But they start putting out books where the player classes are objectively more powerful than the player classes in previous books for their same editions of Dungeons & Dragons. And the reason they do this is pretty simple. There's way more players than game masters. And the player base has gotten this video game min-max optimizer mentality where we treat it like World of Warcraft on a tabletop. And that is pretty damaging to the hobby as a whole. But how do you stop it? They're going to do what makes money. That's true. They're going to do what makes money. And the way they know what makes money is not just, we put this book out and people buy it, is they see the trends in the community in terms of how people play. So, a part of this can come on to game masters. Game masters, you want to stop power creep? Stop running games that allow use of the new material. That's all you got to do. Because if you can't use the new material, players won't buy the new material. And if the new material is changed, that's how we police the companies that create and publish these games for us, is when a new edition comes out, you as a game master should be able to take that, look at it, see what it's like, and then you just say, look, I'm not, I want to play, I'm happy to run games for you guys, but I'm not going to allow anything from whatever this new source book is. I think it's too unbalanced. I'm not going to allow it at my table. I'm not going to write for it. It's not going to be in the worlds that I'm running. I'm not going to run the modules from that expansion or whatever it is. Because the publishers, they pick up their cues based on what the majority of the community is clamoring for. And the majority of the community is players. And you can see that. Like Pulp Cthulhu came out mainly because Call of Cthulhu was a great system, but it was not the world's greatest for a more action-oriented game. So they had a streamlined, action-oriented version that they turned around and created. They called it Pulp Cthulhu. It's more like the pulp novels and less like the Cthulhu Eldritch Horror. They listened to the community. They put it out. The game got bought. So on and so forth. Same thing kind of happened with Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk 2020, you got a lot of older game masters who look at it and they kind of have a lament at the fact that there's not as much as there used to be. There's not as much difference in the weapons. There's not as much flavor in the world, not as much meaningful flavor. And it's almost like, different brands of weapons and different kinds of cyberware from different producers and manufacturers started to have, they used to all have their unique flavor, and you knew that if you were buying a gun from a particular manufacturer, it was going to have certain things it was better at and certain things that it was worse at than guns from another manufacturer. And then Cyberpunk Red came out, and it's way more streamlined. It's almost like it's just a different skin on some of these stuff. It's like, oh, all these weapons are basically the same. There's not really a lot of flavor in it. But the reason's because the player base wanted a more streamlined, simple system. They didn't want the complexity that Cyberpunk 2020 had, for instance. And they stripped it down to where it's bare bones. And kind of one of the best statements that I heard about that was they said, was a presenter that said that Cyberpunk Red is awesome for somebody who did not play Cyberpunk 2020. If you came in and were a new Cyberpunk player and had no real experience, you would say this is a fantastic, awesome game. But for somebody who cut their teeth playing 2020 and really, really got into it and loved that system and loved that world and loved everything about it, they're going to be disappointed by just about everything except netrunning in Cyberpunk Red. But this is how we send these signals out to these publishers. If you don't want something, don't buy it. And if the only way you can kind of help curb others from buying it is don't allow it at your table. That's all there is to it. I just say, hey, look, we're not allowing anything from these books. It is a standing rule at my table that if I don't personally own the book, we don't use it. I'm predominantly a Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 GM, and I do some Cyberpunk and a few other things, and I'm working on my own game system. But D&D 3.5, there's not enough time in a human lifetime to read all the stuff that has to do with that was put out through the open gaming license for 3.5. And it is all over the map because some of it is official, some of it's not. And I just made a rule very early on back in the early 2000s. I said, look, I am not allowing anything that I don't own. If you have something you specifically want, you need to bring it to me and I will go look at it. And if, I'll look at it, look it over, and I'll buy the book if I find enough use in that book and then we can have this thing in our game. But I don't allow it if I don't have it. And you can do the same thing. And that's how we can kind of push back against how these publishers have started to behave. In particular, this could very easily just be a rant against Wizards of the Coast. Because Wizards they just cater to the player who wants to make such and such kind of character. And you look at it, the way they get you to buy they do the same thing with Magic the Gathering. The way they get you to buy the new set is they make the new set objectively more powerful than everything that came before it. So you don't have a choice. Because if you play and you want to use the old stuff and you want to play against or with the people who have the new stuff, they just outclass you because the stuff is objectively more powerful. They've done it's just like when Blizzard or Funcom or whatever company is running an MMO comes out and says, oh, here's the new raid boss with the higher level raid gear. Well, if you don't like the new content, you can not buy it all you want to, but you're going to watch everybody else on the server become more powerful. The only difference here is that as game masters, we can help control that. We can help control that by not using new material at our tables and simply telling players, look, I get it, you want to play the new whatever that came out in, Baba Joe's basket of everything, but I don't have that book. I've looked over that book, and that book is not good material. I think it's out of, I'm not allowing it at my table. And even if I did have it, I haven't had time to review it, so I'm not gonna add these things that I haven't had time to review and work on just because it's new. And are you gonna have some players that are miffed about that and maybe want to stomp off? Okay, yeah, maybe you will. But this is the internet age. If I pop into any Dungeons & Dragons forum and say, hey, I'm looking to run a game in X time, I will have my inbox flooded with people who want to play because game masters are way outnumbered by players. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward. Instead of getting on the internet and griping and complaining about how power creep or this new system is game breaking and they've done a new subclass and that subclass just wrecks everything and just unbalances the sorcerer class or the druid class or whatever, or I don't really these new rules, this new cyberware book that just came out for CP Red is just, this cyberware is just too powerful and doesn't have the right costs or anything to it. Instead of getting online and bitching and complaining and begging everybody in the world to try and help you balance it, just don't allow it at your table. It's going to be rough, but if enough of us do it, that'll send the message back to Wizards of the Coast, Martell Saurian Gaming, Penumbra, any number of these publishers out there, and they'll respond to the market demands and put out more balanced material. That's all I got today. Talk to you next time. Like, share, and subscribe, and pop down in the comments. Let me know, how do you feel about the way publishers have pushed some of this stuff, and how do you feel about us as game masters taking responsibility for being part of what drives that engine where they sell these new books and classes. Talk to you next time.